A question often put to me is, what is the value of the X factor and what influence does it have on driving distance? In recent years, we have been encouraged to believe that in order to produce maximum club head speed and produce increased driving distance, then players need to maximize their X factor and X factor stretch. So let me start by defining X factor and X factor stretch. X factor is the numerical difference between pelvis and thorax rotation at the top of backswing, and the X factor stretch is the increase in this value as the player starts their downswing. In this short video, let's use a PGA current top 20 tour player who's one of the longest drivers in the world, who produces exceptional club head speed and carry distance, to help understand in more detail what values the X factor and X factor stretch. Is this phenomenon exclusive to the pelvis and the rib cage, and do these segment interactions happen across more segments than just the pelvis and rib cage? You will see with this data that is produced by the Ball 3D system that we are now able to measure and locate how much elastic recoil is occurring across these three segments. Firstly, you will see the pelvis and thorax separation and stretch, historically referred to as X factor and X factor stretch. Secondly, you will see that we are now able to also measure the same interaction and relationship that exists across the thorax and the lead upper arm, to be precise, the rib cage, humerus, and the scapula. Finally, we can now understand and explore the same interactions that exist across the lead elbow, wrist, and arm. Looking at the data, what you will see is the player produces only 0.1 degree of X factor stretch, which is therefore hugely insignificant. However, we have been led to believe for some time that in an attempt to produce maximum distance, high levels of X factor stretch are required. Well, with this player, this is simply not true. However, when we look at the levels of activity across the lead shoulder, we see a significantly greater level of stretch shortened cycle through the segments and ultimately the myofascial connections. However, where the greatest levels of elastic length and recoil is being produced is across the lead, wrist, and arm, with values that are substantially greater than the segments they precede. Therefore, a question we can ask is, what is the value of the X factor stretch? Are other segment interactions more valuable in helping produce maximum club head speed? How can we best encourage and train this, and what influences are there on these patterns? We briefly touched upon the stretch shortening cycles. This is when a muscle eccentrically lengthens before it concentrically shortens. This elastic recoil is what helps produce maximum force. Digressing slightly, in future videos published, we will look at the role of force versus speed in golf, define them, then look to explore and answer which ones have more influence and relevance. When looking at these stretch shortening cycles, it is important to understand that one philosophy that we employ in the anatomical frame is there is only one muscle in the human body. However, it is divided into 642 separate pockets, all of them attached by connective tissue called fascia. Therefore, to create these elastic recoils across local segments such as the pelvis and thorax, these stretch shortening cycles actually occur globally. Let's look at two examples. In this video, you will see and track the green lines. These are the myofascial lines that connect and run from the foot, through the knee, across the front of the hip, around the rib cage, over the scapula, and into the skull. Therefore, although we are providing an understanding of the interaction between two segments, the pelvis and the rib cage, the stretch shortening cycle is occurring through the entire human frame. In addition, another myofascial consideration that runs from little finger, up the arm, across the scapula, over the rib cage, down the opposing arm into the opposite little finger. Therefore, to produce the elastic recoil patterns across the lead, shoulder, arm, and wrist, the myofascial activity is also happening through the trail arm. To summarize, what value is the X factor and X factor stretch? Well, for some it's very valuable, however for others it offers minimal influence. Therefore, to suggest big influences on driving distance is a large X factor stretch in this sample of play is simply not true, as some of the reasons why they achieve significant driving distance is due to large activity across the other joints and segments mentioned. Now, one could argue that an increase in their X factor stretch may increase further their driving distance. However, one priority we need to consider is what does change when you make change. Often gains in one area can create regression in others. This is an area I will discuss and review in future releases. My view is we have to look at each player as an individual case study, identify where we can see gains without aggression, what works and why it works for each player, and equally important, understand what each player needs to avoid doing to create bad disruption around club delivery and increasing the chance of pain. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, then please share, and for more information on the Ball 3D system and software and what it provides, then please contact Mark Ball.